G'day, welcome everybody. Welcome to another edition of Their Call. Yep, we'll go with it. Why not? I look a bit stuffed up here. Let me just do that. There we go. Come on, Dan. It's a public holiday week here at Your Call and right across the country, of course. We've had it's a shorter week, and it's a more of a shorter week because you had the Monday off and having to sort of get used to that, and then we've got footy back on a Thursday. So really, it's almost a 1 or 2 day working week. But enough of that. I'm Dan. Welcome to Their Call as part of Your Call. We've got a great guest on with us today. We actually met the great man on the last day of footy action of 2019. So we'll chat about what's been happening since then. My guess is quite a bit. So let's get to him now. He's a Saints legend, two-time All-Australian. He's one of the greats of the game and greats in AFL media at the time, none other than Lee Montagna. He's about to join us very shortly here on Their Call. There he is, Lee Montagna. Welcome to Your Call.
Afternoon, Dan. How you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very excited that footy's back. It's been a long time waiting, hasn't it? So I think we're all pretty keen to get back into it.
Definitely. On that, how have you been coping? Have you been coping?
Look, I've been coping okay. I'd had a bit of time off, like most people in the industry, with no footy on. But mate, can't complain when you get to spend it at home with the family, and it was pretty quiet. But as I said, pretty keen now to get back into some work and back into the footy action.
Excellent. How did you? Let's take it back to, because as I mentioned, we first met. We had a chat with you on the grand final day last year. So obviously a fair bit's happened since then. Round one this year, how were you feeling? Did you think it was too early, or was it the right move to go ahead and then end up calling it quits?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I didn't really have a strong opinion. I mean, we really had no idea, did we? We were all just being guided by the health authorities and a lot smarter people and a lot of people with more authority than us. And we were just going by what they were all saying. I was happy that we played. It was very strange, obviously, without a crowd. You know, we weren't sure what it was going to be like, and then very quickly it was pulled, and that's just the way it was. We didn't really have much time to react to it.
No.
I'm feeling for the players. I mean, it's going to be such a unique season for them. They're going to be doing it tough, not only with having the time off and the training restrictions, but also, I mean, their restrictions in what they are allowed to do for the next 4 months while they're trying to play. It's going to be pretty tough on them, and it's going to take some mental resilience for them to perform at their best.
It's a great point, and something I was going to ask you as a former player yourself. How do you think you would have coped with it? I mean, we're all sitting here going, it's very stop-start, and we got excited for round one, and then it was taken away from us, and now we're having to sort of reset. And even for me, and a lot of people I know, it's sort of, you forget that footy's back. It's exciting, but it's a very jumpy sort of year. How would you have coped, do you think?
Yeah, look, to be honest, it would all depend on what stage of my career I was at, a little bit on where the team was at. I mean, I can see that the players and the teams that probably feel they're in the premiership window are probably better prepared, and they're probably a bit more committed. I think it would be hard for the teams that, I'm sure everyone has the good right intent at this time of year, but once the games start and they realise they probably, are not going to be winning a premiership this year, their motivation levels would be hard. What age you're at. Have you got a young family at home? Are you single? A single man living by yourself or with a couple of other housemates, but you're not allowed to, even go out to a cafe and sit out. A lot of guys, and I was probably a bit different. I'm a footy head, so I'd be happy to sit at home and watch 6 games of footy a weekend. But there are a lot of guys that play these days that don't really, like watching footy. They want to get away and go and surf or play golf or catch up with friends and escape the footy bubble. So for them, they'll find it really difficult. So it all depends on everyone's sort of individual circumstances and where they're at with their football and their life. And it's going to be challenging for a lot of people.
Do you think on that, do you think there's certain players or certain positions? Because I'm thinking from an injury point of view, I feel like with such an interrupted season, and for most of it, they've sort of been left at their own devices for the last 2 months at least.
Yeah.
I know there was, obviously plans, fitness plans sent out by the coaching staff and whatnot, but are there certain players, positionally wise, you think might, not benefit from this?
I think certainly the younger players that haven't got the years of sort of conditioning behind them to be able to sort of handle this period, and also probably players that have got a history of injury. They're the ones that are going to be at most risk. The guys that haven't got a real stable background of conditioning in their body, years of sort of having that already behind them. So I think we're going to see some injuries, no doubt, both collision injuries, but certainly soft tissue injuries. And I think it'll be those players that have already got a history. I mean, we've already seen, the guys that have re-injured themselves so far. Buddy Franklin, we know he's had a history of injuries. Adam Treloar, was coming back off some hamstring injuries already at Collingwood. So I think you'll see guys that have got a history of injury are going to be the ones at high risk.
And given all that, what we've just spoken about, do you think there's the silly debate of the asterisks or not asterisks? Do you think it's actually more impressive if you get through this year with what everyone's been through? Do you think it's more impressive to get to the end and be the last team standing?
The honest question is I don't know yet. I still don't know. I get that it's the right message to sell to all the players that this will be the greatest premiership ever. And I mean, you've got to sell that to the players. Now, as a neutral observer and as a fan, will it be? I don't know. I'm a little bit nervous that maybe in about 4 or 5 weeks after the excitement's probably worn off, we might hit a bit of a flat spot, and it might just be a bit, no, this isn't quite as exciting as, we thought. I know fans are going to come back, but, if we've got 10,000 people at the MCG, it's still not really going to float our boat too much. I mean, it's better than nothing, but I'm still not sure. It's a question that I'm just going to leave open for the time being, and we'll know halfway through the year whether this is a legit, war of attrition and it's a great premiership, or whether it's going to be one that we're going to say, look, it was nice to win it, but it probably wasn't as significant as every other year.
Yeah, right. And now we're about to talk about a massive game that I think still to this day holds the record for the biggest crowd at Marvel, Telstra Dome, call it what you want. But we were talking, Danny and I were talking, my partner here at Your Call, talking about the idea of the home ground advantage is obviously based on dimensions and travel time for teams. But without any home crowd advantage, do you think that is going to become a thing that people realise actually is a bigger part of the home ground advantage than we thought?
It's a great experiment, isn't it, to really see what is the major, because it is one of the great mysteries of world sport, not just AFL. Why did teams win so much more at home? I mean, certainly, no doubt, having that crowd behind you. And, I mean, as a player, you feel that energy when there's a goal kicked and the crowd roar and you get that excitement. And then opposite happens, you're a bit, when you kick a goal and there's no crowd, it does take a little bit of that steam, I suppose, out of your sails. It's not quite the same. There's the factors that the umpires are human and they get sort of caught up in the noise and that noise of affirmation that we've spoken about. Yeah. So you probably get on the right side of the free kick count a little bit more. Certainly the familiarity with being at a home ground, the same locker rooms, the same facilities that you used to also play a factor. I mean, a lot of sports people, and particularly footballers, are creatures of habit. So you like, driving into the same car park, parking in, the same spot you always park and going into your ground. So all those things play a factor. But certainly the home crowd and the noise is one of the major factors, and it's going to be interesting to see whether teams still have a real home ground advantage because of the other parts of it, or whether it's basically because of the noise and the ledger evens up a little bit. Yeah,
definitely. I think there's plenty of things to make it. It's you sort of forget at the end of the day there's still a game on the ground to be played, and a lot of stuff happening around that could benefit or not each and every team playing in the competition. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, it all kicks off tomorrow night. Mate, the reason why we wanted to have a chat mainly was last week Channel 7 replayed the famous 2009 clash between your boys, the Saints, and the Cats at, I think it was Colonial Stadium back then. Both coming into that game undefeated. We recalled it, and it was just, I mean, you know better than most, but it was just non-stop action from go to woe. Take us back, as I said, both teams coming into it undefeated, the Saints and the Cats, and obviously met on the last day of that year. We don't have to go into that too much. But in the lead up, tell us about your memories off the top of that game.
Yeah, certainly the memories were that week. It was like it was finals. I mean, it was all the talk of the town. There was a lot of people speaking about that game. It was all on the news. I think it was the furthest in a season 2 teams have gone undefeated, to be both 13 and zip. And Geelong were the champs at that stage. I mean, they were won the premiership in 2007. They were the red-hot favourites in 2008. So they were the benchmark and the team to beat. And I just remember us looking. I mean, we were always trying to, from that little period, chase Geelong. They were the team that you wanted to try and catch. And we just felt that was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to test ourselves against the best team in the comp, see where we're at, and see, how close we are to the Cats. And it was one hell of a game. I mean, you speak about the noise and the crowd noise. I mean, that was honestly the loudest game of football I've ever played. I mean, I played in front of 100,000 at the MCG, but to have 54,000 under the roof at Marvel. It was it was non-stop noise. It was like sort of, almost a nightclub where it was just reverberating around the whole stadium. And I can still remember that noise. It was a huge occasion. And you're right, the game lived up to all expectations. It was up and back. It was two teams that were going at it. We were in front early. The Cats came back, and I've spoken before about it. You described it was almost like two heavyweight boxers just going toe to toe for 12 rounds. And particularly that last quarter, I've watched it again a few times with no football that's been on a few of the shows, and that last quarter was like round 12 of a boxing match where both boxers were just throwing haymakers, trying to land the killer punch, and neither could. It was an awesome game, and then I suppose Michael Gardner did land the killer punch right at the end. He knocked out Harry Taylor and kicked the winning goal.
And literally, yes, he did.
Literally.
Yeah. And it's obviously the game's changed, but even just looking back, you had, you blokes had Rui and Gardner and Cozzy, sort of domineering your forward line, and the Cats themselves had, Mooney was down there. Just some big sort of, for 2009, a very old school style of footy, and you guys were very, we mentioned, Ross Lyon, the sort of very strategic defence, and if you don't have an option, take your time and that kind of thing. And when the big forwards get some space, go for it. Was that sort of the feeling at the time with your game plan for that year? Do you think?
I certainly think we were sort of defend first. That was that mentality. That was what most successful championship, premiership teams in any sport. You've got to have a really strong defence. But I mean, we were lucky, as you said. We had two gun key forwards who could mark the ball. So it was just more of a bit of a, if in doubt, kick it to Rui was a bit of our motto as a midfield group. He made it look good if there was nothing else on. Even if he had three blokes on it occasionally, just kick it to him and give him a chance, and he'll do something. And Cozzy was a pretty handy second option down there as well. I mean, in that game, he played actually awesome. That was, he took Matty Scarlett really to the cleaners that day. That was a really strong performance by him. But we were lucky to be very fortunate to have, two gun key forwards. And for that year as well, have Michael Gardner, who was, for a period there, he was a dominant ruck, even though he was, getting on a bit in age and had a fair bit of injury.
Yep, definitely. And you mentioned Rui there. I think there's a goal he kicks in about the third quarter from about 65 out, and probably took about 3 steps and just literally taking the piss. And to your point, you give it to him and you can probably, take a seat in the bleachers and watch him do his work. So
that's right. And
after that game, heading into the rest of the season, did you feel like you sort of had bragging rights? You'd sort of conquered the mountain, getting over the, probably the toughest team in the competition, and did it bolster you to get to the last game of the year?
Yeah, I think it just gave us confidence that we knew where we were at then. It certainly wasn't bragging rights or, we'd gotten over them, because we knew deep down we were going to meet them in a final. Now, whether it was a preliminary final or a grand final, we were pretty confident that we were going to play them again. So you didn't want to get too far ahead of yourselves, but it gave us confidence that we could match them. And then, you didn't want to talk about that grand final, but that was another ripping game. I mean, we dominated a fair bit of that game. We just couldn't land. Again, we just couldn't land the knockout punch against a team like Geelong, and unfortunately, we just gave them a sniff, and the chance that they were able to make the most of it and get over the line that last quarter. But we look back with fond memories that we were able to go toe to toe with. I mean, really, they're up there with one of the greatest teams of the modern era. They won 3 flags through that period, should have won 4, and they were just a terrific side. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, no. You need to put you guys in that category as well. No sort of flags to put your names to. But during that period, the Saints were just, a powerhouse. And as a Pies fan, I know that, better than most. So it was some very tense games during that period. So, mate, it's been awesome to reminisce. Before we let you go, we usually like to do a bit of a deep dive and talk about the fans and where people, how people become fans of certain teams. As a kid growing up, I couldn't find it. We did a bit of research on this, but couldn't find much about who you supported as a youngster. Who was that?
Well, you like this. I was a Collingwood supporter as a kid.
Good man. Great.
I used to break for the Pies. Started breaking for them when I was, 5 or 6 in grade prep. Dad was a Collingwood supporter. My earliest memories of actually watching footy, my earliest memory of footy was the 1990 grand final. I can picture being at a friend's house, family friends down the street, sitting in their lounge room watching the 1990 grand final. I was only 7 years of age there, and then loved following them through. I mean, I broke for them in the 90s, and as you remember, they were pretty ordinary in the 90s, the Pies, but we didn't have a lot of wins. But I loved Nathan Buckley, and I used to go every week, and I basically used to follow Nathan Buckley, I watch him on the field. I used to sort of count his stats and watch where he ran, and he was my favourite player. And I sort of think that I've sort of learned a lot just watching how he went about it. Just with being a kid that was 14, 15, I had dreams of playing AFL, but certainly didn't think it was necessarily going to come true. But I just used to love watching the Pies and Bucks. And ironically, my first AFL game, 2002, as an 18-year-old, was against Collingwood.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'd grown up watching them. 6 months earlier, I was sitting at Marvel Stadium. Eddie had at the time watching them play. And then there I was, my first game, running past Anthony Rocker and Paul Acuria and Scott Burns and Nathan Buckley, and thinking, what am I doing out here? It was. I describe it as like being in a video game. I literally felt like I was in a video game that I'd been playing all my life. And here were these people, running past me. And it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's unreal. You can't even imagine. And I imagine it's just, there's no time to think about it either. You've got there's a ball to be gotten. So that's a real, as a kid writing stats for Bucks, did you ever, run out of paper, run out of ink? I
did.
That's a pretty full time.
I do. I remember the game at Vic Park I was at. I'm pretty sure it was against Freo, and he had 45 or 47 touches. He had a day out against Freo at Vic Park, and I remember being there. He had high 40s, and that was the one that I certainly remember. But as you know, the Pies weren't very good throughout the 90s, but Bucks gave us a fair bit of joy.
Yep. Well, I think we're on a good trajectory at the moment. So I guess no choice for you. It was from your dad. He said Pies is the team. That's it. So you never thought about going anywhere else?
I think I've got a vague memory early in primary school of maybe flirting with Hawthorn. I don't know whether it was a friend that was a Hawk supporter or. I think we joked. I mean, my middle name was Matthew, so sort of Lee Matthew. There was a bit of a Lee Matthews sort of slant, but no. I flirted, I think, with Hawthorn prep, but no, by grade 1 or 2, I was a Collingwood supporter and followed them ever since. And started off with the early memories of Dacos and Darren Mullane, and then Paul Williams and Scott Burns and Nathan Buckley until they became my enemy and played against them for a long time.
Of course, I imagine once you pull on that Saints jersey, that's it.
It does happen, and even for a lot of family. I mean, even say my dad or other people that were Collingwood supporters, very easily you then become aligned to the team that you've got a vested interest in. I mean, you're watching your son or a quick story. 2000, my two best mates at school were Geelong supporters, and they came to the 2009 grand final. And I remember chatting to them, and they were wrestling with who they were back. I mean, they're lifelong Cats fans, but at the same time, they wanted to watch their best mate win a flag, and they weren't sure how they were going to go, but they said afterwards that they found themselves in the last quarter barracking for St Kilda because they just, were cheering me on. So it's interesting that you think that, we live and breathe this football team we barrack for, but if you've got a family member or a best friend or someone all of a sudden play for another team, you do get drawn to that personal connection. And then now, I've got a lot of friends and family that are St Kilda supporters for life now.
I think it's no different. It really is no different to, if you shop at Coles your whole life and then a mate of yours gets a job at Woolies. I'm going to support my mate. Like,
similar, yeah.
I reckon I'm spot on with that. I reckon I've nailed that analogy just quietly. Montags, mate, you've been a true gent. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. I imagine it's a busy week for you, given the fact that tomorrow night it all kicks off again for round 2.
Yep.
Thank you again for your time. We've, like we said, you're a Saints legend and one of our favourites in terms of the AFL players who've progressed into the media. Mate, you've done very well for yourself. So, congrats. Enjoy the weekend of new footy, and we'll hopefully chat to you soon.
Will do. Thanks, mate. See ya.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Bye, mate.
Bye.